Welcome back to The Healing Habit, where we talk about the importance of healing and how to make it a part of your everyday life. I'm your host, Cassie,
And I'm Renatha.
and today we're going to be talking about the second step of the forgiveness model, which is identifying your emotions. And I'm really excited about this because last time we were talking about facts versus feelings,
Mhm.
and today we get to focus on the feeling side of this,
Yes,
which is
yes.
like my favorite. I'm such a feeler.
Okay, so why are feelings your favorite?
I think for me, I like to I'm a very self-analytical person,
Mhm.
so I'm always thinking about what I'm feeling, and probably to a fault because I do think my feelings kind of lead me a little bit,
Mm,
and sometimes they lead me astray.
yeah.
But I'm a really big communicator, so I love to talk about my feelings, and anybody who will listen to me, I will share.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
and being able to identify what we feel
Mhm.
is really an important thing because many of people struggle with this,
Mhm.
right? So in my coaching practice, I have a pillow with the feelings wheel on the pillow. I think I mentioned that in a previous
I wish you had
episode.
brought it
I'll
today.
have to bring that with me. I have to bring that
Yeah,
with me. And
yeah.
so with this pillow, people are struggling in the moment to figure out like what emotions am I actually feeling about
Right,
this?
right,
And
right.
so we use the feelings wheel to help them identify what they're experiencing in the moment because sometimes they know what they are experiencing in their body, but being able to articulate what that is sometimes is a challenge.
Right.
And now we live in a culture where we talk about feelings probably more than we ever have in human history because we are learning how to connect with these processes that are happening
Mhm.
physiologically. And when we understand that in the process of forgiveness, feelings play a really important role. I think that it can be easy to sort of dismiss them and sort of push them to the side, specifically if it's a relationship that you're trying to preserve, right? If it's someone who I love and I want to maintain this relationship, there may be something that they do and I am able to sort of attempt to mitigate the damage because I want to preserve this relationship.
Mhm.
So I don't always acknowledge the depth of what I'm feeling in an attempt to make sure that I can move past it to salvage the relationship.
Right.
But if we don't deal with emotions and identify them accurately, it can impede our ability to forgive fully.
Right.
So, what does that mean? So, I'll give you an example. If you are dealing with the situation, and let's say you were, let's use the example that you provided from our last episode,
Mhm.
where you talked about having a communication with the person, and that person making you have some emotions. You felt hurt, you felt embarrassed, you had all of these different feelings in that moment in the situation. And when you walked away from that situation, you then had some additional feelings because you had to then process it and you thought about it. And so there are other things that can come up. So we are talking about identifying the feelings. And in the moment, you had a primary emotion. These are going to be instinctive. That's going to be the immediate response to whatever happened. And then, after reflecting and processing, you can then have secondary emotions. So, if we think about primary emotions and secondary emotions, those primary emotions are really going to be universal. All of us have them, we all experience them, and they can be things like happiness, sadness, fear, anger, surprise, and disgust. These are going to be your first responses, and they're immediate. They're almost just reactions that you have. But then a secondary emotion, when you step away, is going to add some complexity. It is going to provide you with the ability to sort of color that situation based on previous experiences. So those secondary emotions can be all kinds of different things like guilt or shame, pride, jealousy, envy, anything that is going to sort of be on top of that primary emotion. So in your situation, you had a primary emotion of surprise, right? You're
Mhm.
like, "Whoa, what just happened?" But then as you walked away and you processed it, that secondary emotion of shame came up.
Mhm.
And then there was another secondary emotion, anger,
Mhm.
right? And so you've got these feelings that are sort of happening in the moment. And if I'm not able to identify what's happening, then I don't know exactly what to forgive.
I wanna pause and address this kinda quickly
Sure.
because, um, I've been told that my face has subtitles. And I love that because it's very real.
Yeah.
And people will say, "Hey, fix your face," or
Yeah.
whatever.
Mhm.
When I'm processing an
Mhm.
emotion that's negative, everyone can tell. I've
Yeah.
also been told I have the ability to light up a room, but I also have the ability to quite literally steal all the light from the room
Yeah.
because people, I think, can tell. Most people can tell when I'm upset.
Yeah.
And it makes it kind of hard because, and I don't think that this is, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that this is something everybody deals with, but for me personally, pressing pause in the moment and not processing in that moment is so hard for me
Yeah.
because my natural desire is to forget the offense.
Mm.
I want to forget because I don't like being mad at someone. And what I've noticed as a cycle in my life is I forget the offense and then it happens again and it happens again. And forgetting the offense is really just shoving it under the rug.
Yeah.
And so it kind of just piles up and piles up. And then it becomes something that it has to be dealt with, but it's way bigger. And I've noticed that be an unhealthy thing in my life. Right. And so for me, I have to make the decision in the moment of like, I'm not going to hold on to this. I need to process this later. So I either wear it on my face and I'm like, I'm going to hold a grudge until I can have time to process this, where
Mm.
everybody can tell that Cassie's dealing with something, or I try to put it off or press pause for later. And in the act of that, I forget
Yeah.
and I don't ever deal with it because,
Mhm.
okay, well, now that person's acting normal with me and I forget. And I think that that is how we get ourselves into cycles
Yes.
of toxicity and
Mhm.
just letting people treat us poorly. And so I kind of wanted to talk about that because I think
Yes.
that's important.
Well, and this is a really important distinction to make that many people, because we're all made differently, right? So you struggle with being able to press pause on your feelings, and then the next person struggles with being able to connect with their feelings.
Hmm.
So all of us are made differently. And as we acknowledge the fact that how you're made may not necessarily be how another person is made, we create space for people to be how they are.
Right.
So in dealing with those that processing of the emotions and struggling with how to put things aside and coming back to it later, I encourage my clients use the tools of technology to your advantage. Put a tab in your phone for notes and at the top situations to process.
Hmm.
And every night or every morning when you get up, you reflect on what happened the previous day and you deal with those emotions when you have space and time to process them. And so, what you're doing by taking that time to put it or write it down or make a note in your phone to come back to it, what you're saying to your body in that moment that's having the emotion is that I'm not ignoring you. I'm acknowledging you, but I am taking autonomy. And I am saying that as the adult led self, I can take the moment and choose when I process this. But you also have to honor the commitment that you make to yourself to go back and process it,
Right.
right?
Right.
And what will happen over time is you begin this behavioral pattern. You start a new one. You create a new way of being and doing. You say, you know what? This hurt me, or this impacted me, or this was a negative experience. I'm going to deal with this, but right now I have some other things and other responsibilities that I need to handle that I don't want impacted by this situation.
Hmm.
Because here's what can happen: our experiences can hijack our lives.
Yeah.
We can be so focused on what we're feeling and our emotions that we don't have the ability to be able to carry forth. And we're definitely not going to be in a pattern of healing because we're going to be constantly stuck in what we feel. And here's the important thing: feelings are information.
Hmm.
They should make us curious.
Hmm.
They should not have the ability to control us, even though that's what they want.
Hmm.
Our emotions are not there to make us help us make great decisions. That is not the function of our emotions.
Yeah.
Our emotions are there to get our attention, to let us know, hey, there's something that's happening that you need to respond to. And as we are walking through this process of forgiveness, our emotions are attempting to get our attention to let us know that this is how your brain is and your body is processing what happened, so that as you are moving towards forgiving this offense, you can acknowledge what you are experiencing from an emotional perspective.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's super great for when you have time to actually pull out your phone. But let's say it happens in a meeting.
Mhm.
Let's say you're in a business meeting and somebody says something in the moment. Oh, I have a great example.
Okay.
Um, you are in a wedding and you are a part of this person's big day in a bridal party, and somebody in the bridal party snaps at you, but you can't ruin the bride's day.
Yeah.
And it's one of those situations where you're about to like go up and that person's about to get married. You don't have time to just pull out your phone and be like, things to process later.
Mhm.
What do you do in that instance where you know for the next maybe couple hours you're not going to be able to be by your phone to actually write that kind of thing down,
Mhm.
but you don't want to just forget it. It needs to be acknowledged. Like, how do you handle that kind of situation?
Great question.
Yeah.
Because most of us are experiencing that in real life, right?
Mhm.
Because our relationships don't always have a pause button where we
Yeah.
can just like, I'm going to make a note of that.
Yeah.
Sometimes it doesn't
Yeah.
happen. It can be a wedding or a business
Yeah.
situation or in the moment where there's an interaction. What you can do is take a pause and make a mental note and say, I am going to remember this and I'm going to come back to this. Even if we don't have the ability to actually physically write it down, you can make a mental note of it and understand that you have agency over your responses.
Mm.
Because I may not be able to control what happens to me, but I have control over how I respond to it.
Mhm.
So in that moment, you're making a decision because you're looking past what you're feeling and you're taking in the context of the entire situation. You acknowledge that this is somebody else's special day.
Yeah.
You understand that emotions are high.
Mhm.
Remember, we talked about grace and compassion
Mhm.
because just like that bride, it has emotions on her special day and you want to honor her. Those people who are participating are having some emotions about doing it right. So even if there was an offense, you get to decide and say, in that moment, I'm going to make a note of this. I'm going to revisit this, but I don't want to allow my emotions to cause me to act in a way that can ruin somebody else's event.
Yeah. And it, truthfully speaking, it will come back up. Like I get scared, oh what if I forget? But like it will come back up.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes it's a matter of just like I don't want to be like pushing it down, but just kind of like we said, pressing pause, cuz this can happen even, let's say, in a relationship with a spouse or a significant other. Like, you have a situation where wow, that needs to be addressed, but we can't talk about that right now. We're about to go into a family function, or we're about to go into a meeting, or wherever. We can't talk about this right now. We need to be able to press pause, on this,
Yes.
and we will talk about this later. So it's one of those, it will come back up, but just kind of trying to make that mental note and not just ignoring it because things are better, you
Yes.
know?
And that's the key because as we're on this journey to forgiving and learning how to forgive, when we identify the emotions that we feel, what we're saying is that we're honoring ourselves and we want to understand exactly what is happening inside of us about those offenses that we've acknowledged.
Mhm.
So we are not moving it to the side. We're not ignoring it. Let me say, we're not ignoring it. We're saying for the moment, I'm going to set it to the side so I can take care of what is happening in front of me. And we can revisit this so that can move forward in healing.
Mhm.
Because we have these things that we just sort of suppress, right? We push them down, or we sweep them under the rug and we
Mhm.
don't get back to them. And the next thing you know, you've got a rug that's actually the size of a mountain because you have so many things that have been swept underneath it. But what we're saying is that we're going to create space and time in our life to process our emotions. And as I work with clients who struggle with this, who struggle with being able to feel and connect with their emotions, uh, at the end of every day, this is an assignment that I give regularly in my coaching practice. I ask those people to identify at least 3 emotions that they want to process that day. And by processing, I mean that they are attempting to identify and understand the source and origin of those emotions,
Mhm.
and then determining what you need to do with those emotions. Am I supposed to have a conversation with that person? Is this something that I can handle internally? Does it need an external response or can it only be managed internally within the person?
Mhm.
The same thing is true as we're working through this with forgiveness. As I am identifying what I feel, what I am saying is I'm making a determination about what emotions have come up and if those emotions are based on this current situation or something that is reminding me of. We talked about this previously in the last episode of acknowledging the offense and determining if my response is based on what this offense reminds me of. The
Mm.
same thing is true for the emotions. The emotions that I'm feeling could be based on an old event and not necessarily on this one.
Mhm.
So, as we identify what we're feeling, it gives us the ability to isolate those emotions so I can deal with what's happening now without projecting or allowing things from the past to be projected into this situation.
Can we talk about triggers a little bit?
Sure.
Because I know we've talked about this in the past, but I think that we currently in our world are normalizing triggers to a point where it's like, this is just my trigger, and I need you to respect that
Yes.
and not do XYZ because that triggers me into this. Is that healthy? How do we interact in situations where, wow, that brought up feelings, but that person obviously wasn't trying to attack that?
Yes. So normalizing triggers is actually a really great way to sort of characterize it, because what we've come to do is triggers have become just such a part of how we communicate. These are my triggers. These are the things that are happening, and we then ask people to manage our triggers.
Mhm.
And it is not someone's responsibility to manage my triggers. It is my responsibility to be healed from my triggers.
Right.
And as I normalize them, I make those triggers an important part of my life. And I am not engaging in the healing that those triggers are actually inviting me into.
Mhm.
Because triggers themselves can actually be a good thing, because that trigger is letting me know that there is something there that needs to be healed.
Right.
And when I am aware of something that needs to be healed, there is an invitation for me to now step into the habit of healing so that I can live a whole, full life.
Yeah.
But when I normalize the triggers, when I learn to coexist with them, what ends up happening is that I am now a victim of my experiences. I walk through life opened and being accessed all the time because I'm unwilling to confront those things that are seeking to control me.
Right.
So, as I'm experiencing these emotions and as I am attempting to identify my emotions in a forgiving scenario, some of those emotions may be based on triggers. And so, as I'm understanding that I have been triggered by a previous experience, we now have an invitation to go back and heal from that experience
Right.
while you're processing this one.
Right. Absolutely. And so, what would you say for people who are interacting with somebody who is claiming a trigger? Um, so let's say I'm interacting with a person who is telling me, that hurt me. This is something that triggers me. I need you to not do that anymore. How should I respond in a healthy way?
Okay,
Yeah.
that's a really good question,
Yeah.
because again, that word is now becoming a part of how we communicate.
Yeah.
And so as the person who was being told you're triggering me, it is absolutely fair to say, I'm sorry that that's happening for you, but I still have a responsibility to share what's happening in me. And I would encourage you to not blame me for something that's happened in the past.
Yeah.
And maybe this is an opportunity for you to maybe process that so it's no longer controlling you. And now I have to manage what's happening in you internally.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
Because what we tend to do is we try to outsource our healing. So we say to other people, this has hurt me, so don't do that so you won't hurt me,
Yeah.
rather than taking ownership of my own healing
Right.
without holding people responsible
Right.
for walking on eggshells to manage what is happening in me.
This makes me think too of the difference between excuses and reasons.
Mm,
When we're apologizing for something, I think a lot of times we'll say, I'm really sorry that that happened, but this is something that's happened in my past. So that's just how I am now.
yeah.
And I just, I kind of want to talk about that a little bit too, because I think it's okay to make reasons, like to not make reasons
Explain.
to explain and explore the reason
Hmm.
why we're reacting a certain way. So, for example, I might say to you, I'm really sorry that that happened. That reminded me of something that happened when I grew up. But thank you for that experience because now I need to work on that
Hmm.
as a reason. I'm
Yeah.
not asking you to change something based off of my experience. I'm saying I recognize that there's healing that needs to happen here, but that's why. And someone like you might appreciate that I am saying I'm not just rude. That was something that happened in my past that I need to deal with, but I just want you to know that that might be why I acted that way. You know
Yes,
what I mean?
absolutely. So I explained, uh, when I'm speaking about it, I talk about it as explanation versus
Yes, I
excuses.
like that. The 2
Right?
E's.
Exactly. So
Yes.
I can express to you what happened and explain my behavior without excusing my behavior.
Right.
But oftentimes we use an explanation as an excuse. This happened to me, so I responded this way. So you need to get over it and excuse this behavior.
Mhm.
But being able to say, "No, this happened to me. I accept responsibility for my feelings and emotions, but I want you to understand this is why I responded this way and know that I'm going to work on it so that I can be better."
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that this all goes into just identifying what that feeling is. And I think the bottom line here is regardless of what you're dealing with, you need time to process it. You shouldn't just immediately react. You need to step away and take the time to process, which is the thing that a lot of people don't want to do. But in order to identify the reason why that brought up all these feelings, you need to sit down and figure out what those feelings are and where they came from, right?
Well, here's what I will tell you. In the beginning, as we're learning to exercise this new muscle of forgiveness,
Hmm.
it is going to take some time.
Right.
Just like in any situation, when you're learning a new way of being and doing, it'll take time for you to master it. Well, what will happen is over time, your process will get faster and faster and faster. And you will be able to do this process in a matter of seconds. You
Wow.
can identify it and make the decision, deal with the feelings and emotions, and you can forgive instantaneously.
Mm.
The reason why I can say that with confidence is that I have experienced it. I was not a forgiving person. In fact, I was the chief grudge holder. I could put something on a person and I would hold a grudge and I would walk around in anger and frustration. And what I came to understand was I was being more impacted by what I was doing with other people.
Right.
And as I learned about the power of forgiveness and that it is a gift that I give to myself, that it is about me being free and healed and whole, I began the process of becoming forgiving. And over time, it has gotten easier and easier and easier. And now I don't do it perfectly, but I attempt to live in a state of forgiveness so that I'm not bound up or controlled by the emotions that come with offense. So
Hmm.
you can become a more forgiving person and
Right.
you can learn to do this process so quickly that it only happens in moments rather than having to have that long drawn out process.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you feel like it always needs to be addressed then, or sometimes it's just kind of a recognition of, wow, that brought up that feeling in me. I forgive that person.
It depends.
Yeah.
So every situation is going to be different, and every person in those situations are going to be different. The important thing about this model is that no matter your personality type, no matter your unique composition, you can engage with this model and it can help you become a more forgiving person.
Hmm.
So I would love it if life gave us these cookie cutter answers, but because it is so complex, we are all so different, and we're learning to connect with each other in different ways, it is really going to be more nuanced.
Yeah. And I tend to be a more black and white person. And so I'm just like, okay, what's the system here and how do we follow it? And everything has to follow in that way. And I find that when I interact with somebody who's not like me, it's so hard.
Yeah.
Like an external processor versus an internal processor.
Mhm.
I'm an external processor and I'm also dealing with not only the external processing, but also feeling like it needs to be handled right now.
Yes.
And there are people that I interact with that are not that way. They're internal processors and they need space and time. And the space and time is communicating to me that they don't want to be in my life anymore
Yeah.
and that this is not forgivable and that they don't want to have that relationship with me when in actuality it's not that. It's just that they need space and time to process what they are feeling because maybe it doesn't come as naturally to them as it does to me to
Yeah.
identify what those feelings are. And so it's hard to interact with people like that because you want to just talk and
Yeah.
you want to just no, 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 let's not separate. Let's talk about this right now.
Mhm.
And that's going to get more of a reaction than if you just take a pause and come
Yes.
back together.
Well, what's important is that we all identify how we process information.
Mhm.
So you understand that you are an external processor
Mhm.
or a verbal processor, whereas creating space for the internal processes in our life. It goes back to what we talked about in the previous episode, treating people the way we want to be treated,
Right.
right? If you want someone to honor your process, then there has to be room for you to be willing to honor theirs.
Yeah.
And it is about creating space for us as we're in relationship to understand and reason together so that we can get to the goal we both want, which is healing and restoration.
Yeah.
And as we are moving in this process of identifying our emotions, it is understanding that everyone's going to be different.
Yeah.
You're going to look at the exact same situation, and two people can have two extremely different emotions, but
Mm.
each person having the space to understand what they feel, to then be able to articulate it and isolate it so that they can forgive the right thing.
Yeah. Sounds like being in relationship with anybody is a lot of identifying emotions.
Yes, it is. And
Yeah.
that is a safe and healthy thing to do is
Mhm.
to be able to look at and understand what I'm feeling and allow those feelings to make us curious.
Yeah.
What does this remind me of? What else is being brought up? When was the first time I felt this emotion?
Yeah.
How did I process it in the past?
Mm.
What has this emotion created in my life? Do I like what it's created? Or am I wanting to create something different? And so, as I'm asking myself these questions, I'm engaging with what I feel, but I'm not allowing what I feel to control me.
Yeah.
I'm experiencing it and I'm acknowledging that it is there, but I'm also looking for a way to be able to resolve it in a way that is going to be productive and healthy and healing.
Wow. I am just so inspired. I'm ready to go and forgive all the people now. Um and I know that there's so many more steps. What's the third step again?
um, we're going to be we're going to be moving on to the third step, which is actually determining who is really impacted by holding on.
Okay.
Yes.
So this is I think just an excellent segue into that because I know first step is just acknowledging what the offense was. And the second step is then identifying what the feelings were that came from that. So now we're talking about okay, if I hold on to this, who else is going to be impacted by that?
Yes.
So I think that that's just a great place to transition into that. Um, I think that's all the time that we have today, but I'm excited to dive into that. I just want to say thank you again to everybody who's been listening and been with us on this journey in figuring out exactly how to make healing a habit. Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of The Healing Habit. Again, my name is Cassie.
I'm Renatha.
And next episode, we're going to be talking about exactly who are we impacting by holding on to the offense. I'm really excited for that one. If you guys are interested in learning more about how you can dive deeper into this healing habit, or if you're seeking professional help, we have some links included in the description down below. Thank you guys again so much for listening, and we'll see you guys on our next episode. Bye.